If I were the gayest person in the world and a shareholder in Tractor Supply, I would be mortified at what they had done because it was so counter to the best interest of their business model.
I try to liken everything to the music industry, going to concerts, being into bands, getting there early with a band's career. I think this event, the people that are here, I truly believe we're going to talk about this in 10, 15 years and say, I went to this conference, I was at the first conference, and we're going to talk about who's up here. I'm a geek for every single person that's up here, as awkward as that may be. I have so much respect. I love people doing business. I've only been able to have a career because of people that I've been able to talk to, be around. Those who do know me up here can vouch that I'm truly a fan of people, like I said earlier, that just know what it's like to have a lot of lawsuits in their life. It is, to know the level of pain, that people have more pain than me, I love it. I love it. So, all right. First question, and I don't think any of these are facetious. I really mean what I'm about to ask. Is there really a parallel economy? Maybe, I'm really, like, I know we talk about it, like, is it real, or are we just going through a particular kind of market trend and we are capitalizing on it, and that's great. And I guess what I mean by asking that is, are we ever going back, or has something happened and no, there are two worlds now and it's going to be like that for a while? I'm going to let you go first because this is your space.
Well, I wouldn't believe much in our company if I said no, the parallel economy is not real. No, I will actually say that the parallel economy, in my opinion, is not only here, but it's not going anywhere. And a lot of reasons for this, but one of which is that we have 340 million people in our country. And to think that we're all going to view the world or economics or our preferred companies we patronize the same way is an absurd notion. And the idea that we will become more balkanized as future moves forward, I don't think is a controversial one. And in that balkanization, you are going to have companies that recognize it is in their best interest to ensure that they are marketing to a specific group of people and serving them with the best quality excellence and products that they possibly can. So I think there are certainly moments that are flashes in the pan, right? You have the Bud Light's crater, and then you have their competitors rise. You had in 2020 Goya Foods, you guys know Goya, Bob Unanue? Goya came out and Bob said, I'm voting for Trump, sue me. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman from New York City, said, we should lead a boycott against Goya. Riled everybody up. You know what happened? Goya saw the best month of sales they've ever had, to the point where Bob gave AOC Employee of the Month and hung her picture on the wall. I remember in 2014, I was at a Chick-fil-A and there was a line out the door, 2 hours long. People had lawn chairs and all this stuff, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I pull over on the side of the road and I Google what's happening at Chick-fil-A today, and it was National Protest Chick-fil-A Day. But the 2 hour line, those weren't protesters. Those were supporters taking time out of their job to stand in solidarity with Chick-fil-A. My point is, there are these moments that are cultural catalysts that inspire the desire to move your purchasing habits toward a business that we all feel like we can rally behind, but the staying power is pretty enormous. A lot of people come for the values, but stay for the quality of the products. I love Chick-fil-A not just because they take stances for certain things. I love Chick-fil-A because they have the best chicken sandwich, although they're starting to move away from antibiotic-free chicken, which I don't love. But my point is, if a company can recognize that by addressing their market, that doesn't need to look like everybody. I come from marketing. If you try to reach everyone, you'll reach no one. If you can highlight your market, lean into it, let the values of the parallel economy be the thing that gets the door open, but the thing that keeps them there is the quality and the excellence that you demonstrate to your customers above and beyond what your competitors can do. Ultimately, what will happen is people begin to long-term migrate from the broken institutions to this newfound economic system. And I'll leave you with one last quote. This is not just my opinion. Jeff Bezos himself has predicted that one day Amazon would go bankrupt. He's on the record saying that. He doesn't think Amazon will be around forever. He thinks that eventually over time, there's a risk that Amazon will turn into a dinosaur and not be able to adapt to the changing environment. What takes its place? There's a parallel system. We like to make the parallel economy sound more political than it really is. At the end of the day, there are existing institutions. They have every right to exist. I just want to build better ones. That's the parallel economy.
David Bahnsen, you say what?
I just don't know. Is this on? Hello, hello? I don't consider that. I don't consider. I wouldn't use the term parallel economy to describe any of that. It's called competition, and it's existed since time immemorial. And I think that he's exactly right, that there will always be a need for shifting consumer preferences. There will always be needs and wants in the economy, and there will be producers seeking to fill that. And to the extent that there is a company that is doing something that alienates a customer segment, there will be another company that might want to meet the needs of that segment. And I think that's called competition. And Bezos's line about Amazon going bankrupt one day is his point of that creative destruction. Ultimately, there is always a sense in which certain business models that work one period throughout history do not work in another. And there is a lot more companies that were on top of the world in the 1950s and 60s that no longer exist today than there are that are still dominant. You know, one of the greatest indicators of future underperformance is becoming a top 10 company. That's just a fact that in public equities, I actually put this in my own dividendcafe.com today, that the average performance of companies once they become one of the 10 largest companies in the country over the next 10 years is 1.5% per year less than that of the market. And that's just a byproduct, I think, of the forces he's talking about. Some companies don't adopt quickly enough, don't adapt. And so I think all of that is true. But my view, because I have a certain aversion to some things that might sound like subculture, is that I don't view what a lot of us are doing as parallel economy. I view a lot of what we're doing as competitive economic activity. And it may just be semantics. I think what he and I are describing in spirit is very much the same thing, but I don't think it's new whatsoever.
But that's a paradigm. Is something hotter happening right now? Is something pushing at a rate that within this paradigm we've never seen this in at least the last 75 years?
But it's reactionary, and so it can't be sustained at the same level of heat because the pendulum shifting the other way de-intensifies the need for the reaction. So what I'm saying by that is, to the extent that a company a few years ago had a little clearer path to target putting various inappropriate clothes in the kids section, it didn't really take very long for that pendulum to shift back the other way. And there will be other crazy things that happen on this side of glory. But I think that the intensity you're describing comes out of a moment in which we hit peak insanity. And I think that in a lot of categories, this includes ESG, DEI, wokeism, HR mania, various components. I think that you're going to see shifting sands around it. But by no means is insanity going away, but the intensity will shift.
Andrew?
I think there is a parallel economy, and this is why. Because if you look at the Jewish community or even the Muslim community, they trade with each other a lot more because they want to, right? That's their motivation, and their motivation is beyond dollars and cents. It's ideology, right? Which is an economic incentive, right? I want to work with someone who doesn't hate me. I think that's a reasonable thing to want to do. But I also look at, like, if you look at the .com era, right? Late 90s, early 2000s, there's this whole series of businesses that see this opportunity that is happening, and they grab onto it. Many of them failed because they were excited about a shiny thing and not implementing business economics and fundamentals. But those that did are some of the Goliaths that we have today. And I think that there is a market shift right now where conservatives and Christians, like many other communities, are saying, you know what, I'd like to buy from someone who doesn't hate me and doesn't hate my country, and therefore I'm going to put my dollars there You know, when a Patrick Lencioni tells me, you know, if someone made a car that was made by people who didn't hate America, I would go and buy that car even if it cost 20% more. Now, that's not only going to last for so long. Economics will always catch up, the market will catch up, but there is a market moment right now because the left has pushed so hard that I think people are willing to make a decision that is based on more of their emotions and what they want to try and accomplish with their dollars, with their job, even more than just the traditional, what's the cheapest thing out there. So, you know, I had an executive from Career Builder say, look, redballoon.work, I don't know if I agree with your politics, but you just found a market niche that happens to be half the country, and for now, everyone's afraid to touch it. Now, I'll tell you, Indeed.com is the biggest one out there. They've been as woke as the day is long. This June, they did not rainbow their logo, which was surprising because they're starting to feel this pushbacks, right? And so at some point, redballoon.work would not have been needed 10 years ago because you could just go to a job board because it was just a job board, right? You want to get a job, that's where you get your job. And what's going to happen is all this ideological shift to the left is going to come back. And if I don't innovate and make great products that are market moving regardless of the ideology, then I'm going to be a flash in the pan as a business, in my opinion, right? But I'm grabbing this market moment, and I think anybody who does that right now has an opportunity. Like, as a small job board, I shouldn't have gone from 0 to over 4,000 businesses in 2.5 years, unless there was this market moment that I was able to ride that wave. So yes, I think there's a parallel economy. It won't last forever the way it is right now, but it is an enormous economic opportunity right now, in my opinion.
CR.
Well, I want to respond to something that David said that I think is really important to keep in mind, and that is just the virtue of producing goods and services that people are enriched by is all the justification you need. That is a good. There was a phenomenon in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s where the left came up with a way in their minds of redeeming capitalism by making it socially activistic. And initially it was just sort of a fringe thing you found in certain bohemian neighborhoods and stuff like that. But it's been mainstreamed, you know, like Ben & Jerry's, for example. My favorite ice cream is Ben & Jerry's. I haven't eaten Ben & Jerry's in like a decade, just because I can't stand Ben & Jerry. But
You're not hurting them. You gotta eat it.
well, I'm glad to hear you say that. That brings a chunky monkey back into my life.
Amen.
Well, I remember that, but I think the larger thing is that you had a kind of a spread of kind of the fad or the thing of the moment. This is sort of a way to sort of position yourself in the market as being kind of cool and hipster and kind of that, you know, appealing to the urban sort of arts community. And everybody wanted to be in some way, you know, related to that. So I think that in terms of a parallel economy that is tied to the interest of a community, is a reality that, you know, Andrew brings to the surface that I think is really worth thinking about. I've had lots of Jewish friends over the years, and you know, one of the things that I've been intrigued by is the inner kind of workings of that community when it comes to the economic side of things. There's a lot to learn there, and so I think you know, what we see happening in Battleground is kind of along this line. I've got you know, lots of entrepreneurs in my church. And I'm not talking about honey production.
With the raw honey.
But, you know, we're talking about one of the companies that's looking like it might be $1 billion company in the next couple of years. So it's put us in a position in Battleground where we are like a really major player in the town. Not just because of that, but just because of all of the things that are going on. Multiple businesses starting. But there's a kind of synergy that occurs as they work off each other. But, you know, most of the clientele has nothing to do with anything that we're kind of thinking they might be interested in. They just want a transformer, or they want, you know, an airplane or something like that.
A few more pastors here. Mr. Reece.
So the definition of a parallel economy is, I think, the thing that controls your answer. And so the idea that is the parallel economy a strict line over which it is sin to transact? I think that the Lord Jesus Christ could have done trade with no one if the sins of trade partners were something that prohibited you from doing trade. He would have starved very early and found that he was incapable of selling any carpentry goods and would have been a frustration to Joseph. And so, if that's the
There's always the Jesus guy in the room. Yes, ruins everything. Oh, we're going back to God.
Jesus jukes are the only maneuver. So that idea that I don't think it's immoral, like I could sell a product to Adolf Hitler. It would not be immoral. Joseph Stalin, not be immoral. The morality of the other party in the trade is not the moral issue, buying or selling. The thing that is a moral issue is what are you trading? And affinity, liking somebody, knowing somebody, trusting somebody, can be a basis for doing business and can be a part of the cost-benefit analysis, but you have a duty to consider the economic picture there. And the way that we exercise dominion is by making a profit and buying the land and smiling. Right? When we own the stuff, we are ruling. And so the way you have dominion is by doing that. At the same time, the idea that you want to encourage your friends to prosper rather than your enemies is a totally reasonable partial motive, and it's a part of the cost-benefit analysis. So I'm sure that clip will do well for me over time.
I have never gone from a Jesus juke to a Hitler juke. I mean, I don't ever. I mean, so. All right. Go see.
It's always nice to come in at the end of a conversation like this because you get to be the peacemaker. And I mean, look, nobody is saying by parallel economy there exists an entirely separate supply chain, manufacturing infrastructure, distribution system, which is run by Christians at every point, so that when you buy a widget, whatever the widget is, you're only transacting primarily and secondarily and tertiarily with Christians.
They're not saying that.
They're not saying that. If they're saying that,
they would use the word parallel.
if they were, then if they want you notice. But here's the thing: like we all oversimplify for the sake of heuristics. We oversimplify to get a marketing point across. Now, there's a debate to be had about how helpful that is in different contexts. Obviously, the tagline of your company cannot be 4,000 words long. And I don't object to the term parallel economy in the sense that it conveys something. But here's what it conveys. It conveys that these motives, which are increasingly to do with the kind of world that we want to see, the kind of work we want to do, tilts a fraction of people's purchasing decisions and investment decisions in a particular direction. And the great thing is, it doesn't have to tilt everything, right? I can still have my Samsung, and I can still, if I can bear it, drink Starbucks coffee, but I can still buy those things. But if everyone tilts 2% in a direction that is self-consciously seeking to factor in some of these, I want to trade with my friends, not people who hate me, that actually generates huge business opportunities. And that's what we're talking about here. I don't think we have to overstate the point by saying that we're generating an entirely sequestered manufacturing distribution service framework. We can just say we can lean more in a particular direction as circumstances, geographical location opportunities, market sector, and so on permit it.
Can I answer that one point, though?
Yes, please.
Our diaper company's entire supply chain, soup to nuts, is run by Christians. All of it. And I think there's a mistake in this conversation of forgetting how bad the problem
Well, that can't be possible.
No, it is. Actually, our manufacturing family is one of the largest manufacturing families in the world. It is a Catholic family that is very devout in their faith and they're very pro-life. Our fulfillment and 3PL operations throughout the entire supply chain are run by Christians called Frog, fully reliant on God, soup to nuts. They own their own fulfillment operations. And on top of that, our entire team that actually designs, crafts, sells the diapers are Christians. Is the janitor at one of those places a believer? We're working on that. We're working on that.
But you're not saying that the company that generates electricity, that runs the lights in the building, is a Christian electricity company?
Well, I can say that one of the largest manufacturing capabilities in the world, yeah, actually, their entire operation, soup to nuts, is under their ownership, including their own infrastructure that powers their operations. Now, I'm not disagreeing with what your point is, but what I am saying is that you gotta have a level of recognition that should be our goal. Our goal, I believe, should be to work with my friends and to make sure that we're keeping money within our family. That we are actually creating a community where, like the Jews, the dollar is exchanged with 8 hands before it ever leaves the community. I aspire to that goal, so we've tried to make sure that from soup to nuts, to the greatest degree that we can, that we're keeping things within the folks that want to do business with us. But the second point is, I will push back that it's not just a marketing thing. We've literally had people say they will not work with us. We've been canceled by our own bank. So it's not like everybody's trying to earn your business and you just have to make your decision as a consumer of whether or not you want to go with certain people based upon whether or not they pander to your reactionary, momentary political values. PayPal threatened to fine you $2,500 for misinformation. One of our largest investors, no one will bank with them. The industry we play in, protected by the Second Amendment of the United States Bill of Rights, is barred from multiple financial institutions. I told you about Jamie Dimon earlier today. He will not work with the gun industry. For us, we see that as a problem. So we didn't.
But aren't those companies that are not working with them, despite their Second Amendment right to do it, aren't they protected by their own First Amendment rights?
For sure, but it highlights the need for a parallel economy.
But again, back to this, I think the point, you were following up on what Steve had said. When you say your entire supply chain, soup to nuts, is Christian, it requires an understanding what a supply chain is. Do you guys use email?
Yes.
No, let me finish though.
Yeah, of course.
Do you use iPhones?
Yes,
But this is not, I'm not trying to do a gotcha thing. It's a very important. There is no possibility, there's no possibility that your whole supply chain is Christian, because it can't be, because Paul told us it can't be, because we are in the world and not of the world. And the idea the reason I disagree with what you're saying right now, not what you said previously, but the notion that our goal should be to only be doing business with our friends, I think is entirely acceptable for a person's chosen business model. I would question for a lot of people whether or not it's driven by marketing versus a kingdom theology, but the idea that that's normative, that Christians should not be seeking to sell goods and services to non-Christians, or in the supply chain, not have a vendor relationship with non-Christians, I don't think that can possibly be defended as normative. So that would just be my area of disagreement. Hopefully we can agree to disagree on.
Yeah, and I think I would disagree. I think actually that it is a nice and noble pursuit to recognize that if one entity, if all other things are equal, enjoys doing business with me and wants to celebrate the convictions that I hold dear, and another one potentially even is antithetical to my very core convictions, that I would prefer the former. I think that's a very noble pursuit, and why would I give money to my enemies if I don't have to? If all else is equal, why would I not ensure that my friends are rewarded and that the folks that I know I can trust with my dollars will actually reinvest those dollars into noble and righteous pursuits? I think that's a wonderful desire. And frankly, I would believe that over the course of the next 50 years in our country, you are going to see more balkanization and more dissatisfaction with the status quo, that I'm going to continue funding people who have made it their goal to weaponize their entities against me.
But you are funding them. You just said you're all using iPhones.
But what I said earlier today, for any of you who are in the room, is there's a difference between convenience and necessity. I make calls as a consumer or as a business owner based upon convenience or necessity. There are certain things that are very easy to give up. I would suffice to say that Starbucks, in donating to abortion, If you have two equal options and you're choosing Starbucks for a variety of reasons, but the equal option is just its quality and doesn't donate to abortions, that actually should be a cause for a moral stop here. So that's a convenience one. Then there are necessities. There are no Christian cell phone providers. Nobody builds that today.
Because there's no such thing as a Christian cell phone provider.
There such things as a secular cell phone provider?
No, there are Christian, this is the whole point of the sacred secular distinction. This is a dualism that is, I think, at the heart of the debate right now. And I don't think it's what we were talking about with the parallel economy, which I think was, Darren's point was more a cultural moment in terms of what has created, I think, as Andrew pointed out, a certain business opportunity that may not last. But ultimately, identifying the faith of a product is very difficult to do when we are used to dealing teleologically or spiritually with the saving faith being something that belongs to the souls of people. And so this was something that a lot of people went through in a past life around, for example, Christian music, the notion that music was either Christian or not. And it was driven by marketing, and it was another money grab like these things always end up being. But at the end of the day, the company that creates a cell phone service is inherently producing goods and services as part of the creation mandate that meets the needs of humanity. There are believers who do it and there are unbelievers who do it. And there are companies that do it that have certain practices and use of their profits that would be unbiblical, and there are companies that have practices and use of profits that would be biblical, but the delivery of goods and services is inherently faithful to the creation mandate.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying if I have a company, this is not that hard. If I have a cell phone company that's giving money to abortion or a cell phone company that's not, I'm going to choose the one that's not. And I find it like mental gymnastics to argue that somehow. Like, at the end of the day, people can do what they want.
But I'm asking the limiting principle. So this is the part about my point of trillions of transactions a moment, that the second in the economy, I'm grateful to Paul for his exhortation that we're in the world and not of the world. It is Kevin Bacon's 6 degrees of separation that we're talking about. We are sitting on chairs right now. We don't know who made them. And we are giving our money to a company that we think is a Christian company. And they're banking at a company who banks another company who does bad things. And the only debate is whether it's 2 degrees of separation or 4 degrees.
Yeah.
And so
I'll say is
it's
that,
very high-hanging fruit, I think, to try to identify vendors in that capacity.
and this is where we'll agree to disagree. The last thing I'll say is I believe firmly, and I said this in my talk earlier today, just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I should do nothing. That simple.
Nobody disagrees with that. I don't.
But
It's what we focus doing is, I think, what we're debating.
I know, but my point is that if I have the option to start somewhere, I'm going to start somewhere with the goal of eventually replacing everything. But that's where we disagree that that's even a pursuit that we should even have. And I actually think it is. I think that businesses are better run in the hands of Christians that will do with their profits what will glorify the kingdom. And I want to chip away at that aim as much as I possibly can.
I would suggest that the duty is not to trade specifically with Christians. The duty, and you might disagree with this part, is I think there should be explicitly Christian companies. And I think that the idea is that we put the word of God on the doorpost. I think that the household is that which owns companies. The estate is a private thing. And so when we think about public companies, publicly traded, is not that it's a part of the public sphere. It's not a part of the civil order or the ecclesiastical order. It is a part of the household in terms of the dominion grant there. And so this idea that we ought to have companies acknowledge the authority of the word of God over them, and whether the regulators would like that or not, or whether or not that would be the case, that the shareholders would desire that, they are the ones who are responsible. The shareholders have control over that. And when you are a majority shareholder, you should say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, which means trying to impose a law order on the control of that property. So our employees won't work on the Sabbath. We're going to apply the 8th commandment in terms of not trying to steal. We're going to seek to bear honest testimony. So we're going to apply that, and that would be also which God are we honoring in terms of the company. That doesn't mean everybody underneath the authority of that household is a Christian. The idea is that they are hired servants, that not slaves that are being brought into a forced condition there. The idea is they're just simply having a contractual relationship, so the employees are somebody who's receiving a wage, but the property itself being governed underneath that company or that the household that owns those shares, there's an obligation to apply the law there.
This is so good. Oh my gosh.
It's good to debate.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Michael, I'm actually out. There's no gotcha here. I'm still super fascinated by that statement, and I'm not even trying to run it down. I'm loving this. When you say that, because I feel like, or I'm sensing, you're like, well, of course there's nuance. I just want to. I'm here for everybody up here. There's no gotcha here. I'm assuming there's nuance. So my follow up on that is. I'm not trying to do this reductionist game down to the atoms. I'm not playing this game. But the actual material for the diapers come from where?
Mexico.
Okay. And I think we all know Mexicans are Catholic. Kind of counts as Christian. I mean, are we there? I mean, there's no Muslims down there, right? Where's my Mexicans? Where's my Mexican Catholics in the room? Here we go. What did I say?
Well, no, I was just to say.
I'm speaking in tongues. My bad.
I'll try to remember it. No, the original comment was about manufacturing. So I'm making the point that you actually can get manufacturers that will make from the non-woven materials all the way to the final product of the actual diaper, believe it or not, all controlled by Christians. And here's why we did that. It's not just because I wanted to have a supply chain that was to the fullest extent possible, led by Christians. It's also because we went to another one that said, the minute you get bad press, you're gone. They don't want your business. It's just because maybe you haven't spoken out enough yet, but I do speak out a lot, and I've had bankers call me.
Shots fired, Michael.
I'm just saying, if you haven't faced the pressure yet, you might need to talk out more, and you'll learn really, all of a sudden, where there's a need for a parallel economy. Our first 3 months of our company, we banked with Chase. And our banker called when we had over $1 million in our checking account and said, I'm a little worried about this conservative thing. A bank. So we left. So my point is, there's way more opportunity out there, and we've had to go pursue it because we've literally been told, you have no other option. We will not work with you. And so we've had to create alternatives, and in that creating of the alternatives, I've learned that even for things like manufacturing of non-woven materials, there are believers out there. Why would I not prioritize them? And then I learned for fulfillment, I can do the same thing. Oh my gosh, fully reliant on God. Why would we have to use Amazon shipping capabilities? This incredible organization wants to help me and bless our convictions in the process. So that's really at the heart of all of it.
I got you.
Well, and I think that, Thomas Sowell talks about there's a real cost to trust or lack of trust, right? And you see economies that don't have trust, they really struggle. And you can quantify that cost of trust and security, right? And so part of this is you want to work with people you can trust, and that's going to be a fellow believer, someone who's not going to get worried about the pro-life thing, right? And that's just an economic principle. And if you're going to work with someone who's likely going to cancel you, well, that's a dumb idea. And so that's part of the reason we're not on AWS. That's part of the reason you're moving to Rumble Cloud.
But then they go and sleep with their secretary. And then what do we do?
And I'm not trying to call it perfect, but here's the other thing.
No, but I'm asking, what do we do then when all of a sudden, like, oh, the guy, their company, and it turns out, oh, goodness, then what?
The world's a messy place, but when I had investors in my previous company, and I wasn't more careful about who invested, then 2020 came around, they lost their mind with everybody else, and I lost my job because I was a conservative Christian. So now with Red Balloon, I'm only working with investors that I trust. Barely. but I think, but that's an important point. Like, you also need to understand what are your points of weakness, and you never expose yourself to someone you don't trust when it's a point of weakness. And that's when I think, when it comes to the parallel economy, what are your hugest weaknesses of your business? Well, you better be working with people you trust. And as a side note, I wouldn't sell a gun to Hitler if he was like attacking my town. So I think there are some limitations. Just throwing that out there.
It was broken.
Okay.
Overcharged.
Fine, go ahead. You just ripped off Hitler.
and now he's mad. Good, that works out well. So, wait, but hold on, but should Red Balloon and Public Square then have some sort of statement at the top of their business that says, listen, if I go sleep with my secretary, don't come back. If we do X, Y, or Z, what do you guys have to do to tell people, don't, like, are there rules for you guys? For people to stop coming to your company?
No rules.
All right, I mean, look, I'm just asking the question. I'm asking the question. Like, it just seems like
So the market will respond. The market will respond. If all of a sudden Red Balloon or Public Square starts doing a gay pride parade, I bet you we lose all of our customers in a hot minute. The market will respond. So yes, there are rules, and we let the market take care of it.
Pastor.
If we were sleeping with our secretary, that is every reason for our consumers to say, you have completely lost my trust. You are no longer representative of the parallel economy that you've espoused.
Got it, thank you.
So it's interesting
You're
here.
against adultery.
Yes, we are.
The point you're raising, the point you're raising is a striking one, and it's actionable. So here's what's going on. So Michael and Andrew have spoken to this issue of implicitly, what if the people who we are taking as trustworthy, because we make Christian a proxy for trustworthy, turn out not to be particularly faithful Christians occasionally?
Correct.
Right, so what happens if, well, okay, just occasionally, perish of thought, okay? Well, this speaks to a couple of things, it strikes me. First, what we're talking about here and what you guys are privileged to be working in requires a kind of high-level strategic thinking that, well, in terms of professional competence, is beyond me, probably beyond most of us. But more to the point, it is actually not relevant for most of us. Here's why. David made the point that just as there's a kind of evangelical pietism that is not connected with action in the world, there's a kind of reformed pietism that's not connected with action in the world as well. But reformed pietism takes the form of theorizing and philosophizing about things that are so far from what we actually do day to day that they don't actually make much difference to us. But they make a lot of difference to you because you're building the structures. But here's the thing, you men and women and young people may not be in a position to formulate and action a coherent philosophy of lowercase p parallel economy. What you can do is make sure that you're not the guy who has an affair with his secretary. You can make sure that you are actually the most fruitful worker in your office, the most diligent worker on the construction site, the most faithful mum, the most hardworking kid in your class at school. Now, over time, I'm going to finish with this and just stir the pot a bit more, to speak to something I do know something about. Over time, there are two ways of creating a Christian parallel economy. One way is to build the structures which sequester us from the rest of the world. The other way is to trust in the living God to convert the world. Amen. Now, if you're willing to embrace that long-term optimistic post-mill eschatology, that gives you a teleology on the basis of which to do your work now. You can say, I'm just happy to be a very, very tiny cog in some massive 1,000-generation long machine that the living God is building. We'll do our thing, we'll try, see what works, we'll build this website, this recruitment service, we'll build these enterprises, these businesses. But much more to the point, thousands of people out there will be living the most godly lives they can, being the best worker in their office, being holy, loving their wives, loving their husbands, loving their kids, and not being the reason why people don't trust Christians. And then you just wait 1,000 generations, and then we're done.
Can I say one more, and then I promise I'll be quiet. I think it used to be if you saw a fish on the window of a business, you knew you were about to get a crappy product, right? Right? And it was going to be overpriced. But I think what is happening right now with the push to the left that's happening in America, that when we call it a parallel economy or freedom economy, whatever it is, I think there are people who are actually trying to be intentionally Christian and conservative in the way that they're running their businesses. And I think you're getting good products because they're they want to bless their customer. They want to not just try and rip off their customer. So in the same way that you're talking about, like work is starting to get talked about as a good thing in these circles. I think getting back to the Puritan work ethic, as honest as a Huguenot, I see a shift, maybe incremental as though it may be. I see a shift back to that fish at some point, although it shouldn't be a fish, it's pretty cheesy. But anyway, that will actually mean a positive thing, not a negative thing. That's my hope. And I think if we push, when you're bending a hanger, sometimes you bend it too far and then it goes back to normal. Like we're gonna push really hard to try and build these structures so that people are safe and they can build their Christian businesses without worry of cancellation and so on and so forth. I hope that 10 years from now, this isn't even as needed as it is right now.
And I want to add one data point just to back that up. Our platform is converting folks, actually. Not just spiritually, but politically. We hit 1 million members on our platform faster than Twitter, Airbnb, Spotify, and 26% of our purchasers over the last 60 days have been registered Democrats, 22% independent or no party affiliation, and only 52% registered Republican. So our platform's changing culture. I'm getting Democrats to shop for me and the 80,000 Christian merchants that are on our site. So we're actually getting the wealth from the people that have historically opposed us and moved it to people that are actually utilizing our funds for righteous causes. So I think all of the philosophizing on stage is wonderful, and I'm really glad that we are trying to strategically think about how to best structure this. But at the end of the day, like our platform only works because Christian moms are out there buying toilet paper on our platform, and it's driving sales. And they're doing it because the business has a wonderful family story. And it's great to see, and it's very rewarding, and it's awesome. Like, my long-term game is that those little transactions rooted in trust end up building an alternative sort of economic ecosystem that actually overwhelms the existing structures. And the toilet paper doesn't have a fish on it. It's just better toilet paper with a great family-run story. And I believe ultimately at the end of the day, last thing I'll say, our gospel expression should communicate through everything that we do, not just how we preach, but certainly the businesses that we run. And if I'm willing to basically say, oh, that's out the window because economics is pure nihilism as it relates to my faith expression, or those two things are detached, then I don't think I'm doing a great job of utilizing the gift God's given me to go sell a lot of toilet paper for the kingdom of God. And now it's a funny example. That is what we're seeing though, because I think a lot of people look at the parallel economy and think, I bet the only people interested in this are just like die-hard conservative consumers. Like, actually, no, our audience is pretty reflective, and I know this is a redolent too. He's got leftist businesses or neutral businesses that are like, hey, I'm kind of in. You're getting better people than we're getting at Indeed. How the heck are you finding that? This is the tide that will turn over time as we pursue this concept of a parallel economy. Eventually, it becomes the dominant economy, which is, I think, the dream of all of us on stage. I would believe.
Mr. Bahnsen?
Just summing up, I think the sentiment of the last two comments, a very pithy expression I use all the time, that piety is no substitute for technique.
I'm going to try to make Mr. Bahnsen here a fundamentalist as quickly as I can. I think you made it public. If you didn't, I apologize. Maybe I was reading text messages between us. We don't text that much. You canceled your Disney Plus account?
Oh, you're going back a little bit. Tell me where you're going with this. No, I did.
Don't play that game with me.
I did not believe that consumer boycotts are effective technique. No.
Did you cancel your Disney Plus?
We have a Hulu Plus that includes Disney. But there was and the kids have gone on Disney cruises. I won't go to Disneyland, but that has nothing to do with my value system. It has to do with my taste and what to do with my time. So unfortunately, the example that you're using that I think you want to go somewhere else with, it may have other factors involved.
There was a moment. I thought
so
you
what
wrote.
you're referring to, that would have been a text thing. It's totally fine. Every single thing in my life I'm willing to talk about very, very publicly, transparently. I have nothing to hide. But I had a daughter that was watching too much, and so I canceled her Disney Plus. And then Disney is one of these companies. We don't own it in our portfolio, but the reason I do not own it has nothing to do whatsoever with what I believe they are making or the ethos behind that. It has to do with my adjudication of the investment merits of the company as evidenced in their willingness to share profits with their owners of the business that we call dividends. However, I think Disney was doing great damage to their customers and doing great damage to their shareholders, as is evidenced in a number of things that could be rationalized empirically. And so, despite my belief that for the most part, boycottism is generally somewhat pharisaical and almost always extremely ineffective, with a couple real nuanced outlier exceptions, the Bud Light one being one of the most screaming counterexamples in history that was entirely cultural and market sensitive. But with Disney, I would not take $6.99 away from a $130 billion company and believe I was doing something effective for the kingdom, because I think that I do math better than them.
Do you think Tractor Supply is having a moment?
Do I think Tractor Supply is having a moment in what sense?
Being boycotted on some level, and I mean, you don't seem to, I mean, are you on such a level of investment in the stock, and just there's ups and downs, and it's like it's probably going to go back up, and Target eventually went back up. I mean, were you just buying Target when it was down?
No, we weren't, because again, I really believe that Target, on the base, I'm paid by clients to give investment advice and deliver an outcome that I believe is imperative for their own financial well-being. So I want to use capital markets to create solutions that matter to people's lives. And in so doing, there are producers of goods and services that receive capital, and they can only get a return on investment if they make goods and services that make a difference in people's lives. So there's three parties going on, and I care very much about the entirety of the transaction. There's the party of the capital going into a producer, there's the party of the producer serving into the consumer, and then there's what the consumer chooses to do. This is a byproduct of business, of the marketplace. And the area in which I have more expertise and passion is in capital markets, not necessarily in all the operational elements of a different company. I don't feel that I am as good at doing consumer marketing, say, as Procter & Gamble. With Target, though, it was a rather low-hanging fruit example of the financial structure, the strategy, operations, management being in a place at that point of philosophical schizophrenia that it was clear that we wanted to avoid it. If Target was putting transgender-friendly clothes in the kids section and was a screaming, compelling buy for my clients, there's nothing I'd love to do more than become a shareholder and go get Target to stop doing that. And yet, I didn't find them to be a compelling investment. So I do not have the resources to go operate in that domain only as an activist. I want to operate as an owner. David was talking about the benefit of private property and ownership in these things. All the companies that we are engaged with, all the companies we're seeking incremental improvements with, we have to own and own significantly, and I have to own and have owned for a while. And these are our rights as shareholders, and I intend to use them till my dying day.
Michael, do you have a comment on that? You kind of sat up, and like you were stretching.
No, I wasn't stretching. But I am curious to hear if you do not believe that the Tractor Supply boycott was effective.
It's not one that I am in no way familiar with the details with. Yeah,
so we helped lead that boycott. And yesterday...
Feel good about yourself, Michael?
I do.
Okay, just wondering.
Here's why I feel really great about myself. Tractor Supply last night released a statement, if you weren't aware. Stock took a huge tank. Boycotts worked. Last night, CR releases a letter. No more Pride celebrations. They're firing their entire DEI department. They're basing their company and all hiring standards moving forward on meritocracy and excellence. They also are dropping all environmental social initiatives and focusing purely on rural communities. And they have action steps items associated with each and every one of these tasks. You know why? Because Public Square and Robbie Starbuck and Donald Trump Jr. went out to X and said, rural America, this company says they're for you, and everything they're doing is against you. Our encouragement, stop giving them your money. When they apologize and they can prove that they actually care about your interests as consumers, we'll be happy to report it. And guess what they did? And now, Tractor Supplies and talks about joining Public Square. So I just have a hard time with this concept of like, it doesn't work. Yo, you can think that. We're doing it. Like, Tractor Supply CEO last night wrote the letter. So I am just curious how boycotts don't work or aren't effective when we hired the guy from Target.
No, but see, what you just explained in that marketplace, that's a real easy one to respond to. It's sort of the exact opposite of a Nike deal, and I made the point about the Bud Light exception. There is the lowest of hanging of fruits in the this is the stuff that's just a mystery to me. A company that has that demographic of customer is screaming for you to do what you did. It is so stupid from a market segment. If I were the gayest person in the world and a shareholder in Tractor Supply, I would be mortified at what they had done because it was so counter to the best interest of their business model. So Bud Light happened to be an American beer.
Just take it in.
It happened to be you know what I mean.
I do.
Let me get to that.
I mean the gayest, not like on the fence in the closet, like just out.
The issue where some of these things can work is when it's exactly the point I was making, is that when it is so aligned with the social fabric of the customer base. In other words, conservatives said, oh, you know what, Nike, and they're taking a knee, and BLM, I'm going to boycott Nike. I'm like, okay, well, good luck with that. And it didn't work with Nike. And it does work with Bud Light and Tractor Supply. And what's the difference? It's a market segment. So the wisdom involved to recognize where there is a customer base that is at the very core of what we're discussing. So the notion of a rural demographic and a company engaged in Tractor Supply behaving in that kind of cartoonishly stupid behavior had no option but for a boycott in that capacity to work. The Bud Light thing, it was not the beer that cosmopolitan people in Upper West Side drink. It was a Middle America beer. It was perfect for that kind of boycott. So in that sense, you're still talking about market forces and market demographics.
I'm gonna try to add something as opposed to just layering jokes through this. I would think based on Tractor Supply and Target and Bud Light, I would say as of today, not back when they were originally trying to do a little taking the knee and Nike, I would say the power of social media today is a much different beast today when it comes to communicating things than it was back in BLM with Nike. I would argue that as of today, every company's head is on the chopping block if people decide to go after them. If Nike did that today, I think they would be, well, if to the extent that Tractor Supply or if Bud Light had an issue, I think everyone could be hit, unless you think big deal, they get hit for a month and then they come back up.
Yeah, in this case, it's not the timing of it. I understand what you're saying. I do disagree, but you're trying to say maybe the methodology be different. I'm just simply saying the fundamental difference was market segment. And I just happen to know that Nike analyzed it and they did not respond at first. And then they did their analysis and said, you know what, we're going to make a fortune if they do this boycott. And sales of Kaepernick product went up huge. The exact counterfactual to what you talked about with AOC, and that, what was the company? Goya. That basically she gave them free advertising. The absolute insanity of the way people boycotted against Christian chicken a few years back with Chick-fil-A. Those things were very effective to the company, and the way that people responded to Nike and Kaepernick, it ended up being extremely beneficial to Nike in that campaign. But that's my comment on the market segment.
Got it. Are you getting your value? I mean, just...
So Can we do beat up on David Bahnsen night?
Sure, why not? Let's do this.
He's so scared. I mean, just look at him.
Terrifying. So you're saying that there's not, if a company supports abortion, but their market fundamentals are amazing and their dividends are extraordinary and they don't have a huge risk of boycott, then sure, as long as it's good. What about a porn company?
I believe that pornography is sinful, and I do not believe that the production of goods and services that meet the needs of mankind, like shoes, is sinful. And so what you're talking about is to do with the actual inerrant purpose of the company. There are not publicly traded pornography companies for a reason, and it's not moral. It's not a good business in that capacity that can scale in public markets. It requires certain privacy. So I
Disney
think
doesn't count?
I think it's a very fair question, but I think that what I'm saying is it will be very, very difficult to find me contradicting myself on this. The principles are very important. I believe that on the other side of sin, we are in a fallen world, and all of us are beneficiaries on a daily basis of something called common grace. And I think that it is an example of how much God loves us, that he allows the rain to fall on the saved and the unsaved, and that we utilize the technology that has been made for our convenience by unbelievers. I think it is a daily blessing that there are heart surgeons that can perform surgery on our loved ones that have a skill set that they achieve despite not having a saving knowledge of the Lord. At the end of the day, as a believer, it is my desperate passion that all men, women, children come to a saving knowledge of Christ. But when it comes to these functions in the marketplace, Andrew's question is very effective, and I'll make the line very simple. We are referring to the principle of what the core of a business does. If the core of the business is producing goods and services meet the needs of humanity, it's not inherently sinful. If you say, yeah, but when they get some of the profits, they go give it to things I don't like, I say, you are doing that right now. Every single one of you, not by owning equity in a public company that you didn't even give the money to the company. You just bought shares from somebody else. Every one of you are in the Hilton Hotel, and they are going to do bad things with the money. And when they're not, they're going to give it to other suppliers, and you have no way of knowing what they're doing with the money. And I can go on and on and on with this. And thank God, by God's grace, we don't have to go evaluate all of those different dimensions. I wouldn't invest in a pornography company because I'd be supporting directly a sinful activity and that I believe is an unprofitable business, not accessible in capital markets and so forth, and in public markets rather, and so forth and so on. But to the extent that we want to really dig into what our obligation is, if it were sinful to have money leave our pocket that goes to someone else, David made this point earlier, it would not be good enough to say it's only not sinful if we don't know. You would have an obligation to know. And I got really bad news for you. You're going to find out that it is every single time. The only question is if the money is going to someone who's going to sin with it the first time or the second time. That's it. But I hope that casts a little clarification. And so, Andrew, for the final time, I'm not investing in your porn company.
Food porn. It's a food porn site. It's steak and it's close. Yeah, get CR back into this. CR, just jump in after the porn comment. Can you just say something witty?
I'm against porn.
Thank you. Thank you. It's about time somebody stood up on this panel. Michael's over there just straddling the line. It's like, I don't even know what he believes. It's so confusing at this point. Like, it honestly does remind me, the way David is coming at it and Michael's coming at it, it reminds me of when I see pastors talking about the way they approach things in street evangelists. No, I really mean this. Michael's down in the trenches. I mean, you're in the trenches, you're fired up, people are taking shots at you. I mean, it's real, it's visceral. And you're like, there's enemies out here. No, I get there's enemies. They turn off bank accounts and they want to kill you and they send death threats. I mean, you've probably never gotten a death threat.
No comment.
So it's visceral, it's real, right? David's fighting a different battle. I really believe that. You sit in a different place, you're playing a different game, and that's what I think makes this conversation. Guys, this is high level, not like, oh, we're into like, no, this is to have these people here talking about this stuff, to hear this, this is what we need to be thinking about as Christians. Incredibly valid viewpoints. And you have to understand that these two views, you couldn't get two better views on this subject. Because these guys are fine to go hang out and have a great time and do, but what I'm watching, what I want to interpret, which I promised I would do here, is also try to just make some calls on what is going on. You're in the trenches. And you're in the trenches in a very unique way because you're also a public company. So it's not like you don't know how this whole, like you've got to play both worlds. I get it. David's playing a particular world as well. I'm seeing a lot of common ground. I love the pushback that's happening here because it's easy and it's not easy. I mean, that's the one in the many. These are the things that we have to look at as Christians. So, but these conversations aren't happening. This conversation you are not going to see anywhere else, which is why this whole conference is taking a couple hundred people in this room saying, if we can start having these conversations, and more people thinking about it and bringing what they're doing to this conversation. The reason why this conversation is kind of like, is because literally no one's having this conversation. Everyone is so sequestered. So what I'm experiencing here is an unbelievable amount of blessing. I hope you guys are getting that too. Like, this is just like, woo! How much time do we have left? What time is it? What time is it? Who's got the time? What time is it?
There's a big clock.
Oh, I thought that was the countdown back. I kept looking.
That's not a Christian clock, but it's still an accurate.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to believe it. Until I know who made that clock, I'll tell you what. Public Square, did you order it on the app? By the way, quick shout out to Public Square. I'm getting some fantastic steak. That's what got me.
That's what I'm talking about.
So there comes a moment when you kind of go like, what do I really want to use this for? Like, and that's why I know there's so much growth potential there, because I know what Public Square is. I'm all about it. Like, I'm into it. Cool. I like punk rock things. Yeah, let's go upset people and I love it. I love it, right? You know what I mean? But it's like, what am I going to use it for? One day I was like, I wonder if they have steak. There's a lot of steak. And by the way, they have a product there, I think it's just called like only ribeyes. And when I buy steak, I don't want 9 different steaks. What's that? Is that what? I'm like, and so there was someone that said only ribeyes. I was like, that's what I'm looking for. I want 9. I don't want mixed steaks. I don't want, and so there it was, only ribeyes. Check it out, you know. I'm not saying it's a great deal, but I overpay for everything. So, but my conscience is going to feel good. You know, great steak. So, we could go on all night with this, and I would like to, but I think we're done. Do you want to keep? I mean, I got Juan. Where's Juan?
I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Hold on, because at some point,
I wanted to ask a question.
Juan, get over here really quick. Just real quick before I just don't want to miss this moment. Juan, get up here. Another Mexican brother. Real quick, this man, are you buying drinks for people? What's going on later?
He's sponsoring the beer.
Sponsoring. You're sponsoring.
Tell us what I'm real quick.
Sponsoring the beer, drink up. The glory of God, of course.
A+ right here, in town, business. Just tell them what you do real quick.
I do foundation repair for DFW Homes. It's quite the story. Come talk to me about it.
You want Christians laying that foundation? Right there. If Michael builds a house here, I tell you right now, and it's all certified. It is, I mean, everyone, like when everyone comes to work, they baptize every person, Michael. So there's no way to even get on the property. It's just a fire hose, Presbyterianism, just spray. Okay, thank you for sponsoring the party, the beer, drinks, all that stuff. So. A plus right there, people. A plus. Okay, go ahead, Pastor.
So I wanted to ask a question. So this is coming from a place that, so as a pastor, I've got people who, and I made the joke about raw honey earlier, okay? So let me now try and repair a relationship with one parishioner and explain what I'm getting at. So I've got, and I want David and Michael, if you wouldn't mind, to speak to this. I've got people who come to me who have some mixture of these sentiments. They either want to change ungodly things about companies that they're engaged in or with, or they want to find godly companies to work with. And one solution they think is, oh, to heck with this. I'm just going to do me around my kitchen table with my wife and kids, cottage industries, local, just, and the point is not simply that it's an attempt to be sequestered. It's also implicitly a rejection of specialization, mass production, and industrialization, and so on and so forth. Now, I wonder, I mean, I know, Chris, this is something that you've thought about a great deal in terms of the relationship between work and family, but I'd love to hear some thoughts from David and Michael. Can you say anything to the raw honey friends to say, listen, you carry on with the raw honey, that's great, but to affirm the value of larger corporate structures, whichever angle on them that you should take. You with me?
Michael, go ahead.
I would just say that, at Public Square, one thing that's unique is 99.5% of our businesses out of the 80,000 are actually small businesses. So we don't have a lot of big box store representation, and many of the businesses are rooted in local community. And so even the meat companies, it's local ranchers that are producing food, first and foremost for their local community, but ultimately can scale in a direct-to-consumer environment as well. What I would say is that this is a little bit of a both and. I think you can embrace the local and celebrate the familial and what's really close and tangible to you. And you should actually seek to probably prioritize that any chance you get, especially when you're looking at things like ingredients and sourcing your food locally, things like this. But that said, you should also love it when they grow and scale, because the growth and the scale of those local enterprises is a sign. Look at that.
I'll take David's. I'll take Mr. Bahnsen's.
So I would just say that I actually think the right approach, the answer is not a hut in the woods. Like, the answer is not detach into a holy huddle where you're completely separated off from anything that you had to pay money for. But at the same time, I do think there's a beauty in prioritizing what's tangible and local, because that also is often where the trust is found. As corporations grow and scale, they also get heavily influenced by politicians, and lobbyists start to play a role. And when you have government subsidies in the mix, and you have 19 lobbyists from one department onto one government agency that's ensuring they're getting special favors and 5,000-page bills, you're going to run the risk that the lack of transparency starts to become pretty evident compared to what's local and familial and trustworthy. I'm a raw milk guy, drink it a lot. I'm a raw honey guy, I love it. So I'm in that community, and at the same time, I want to scale a huge business, because I want what was rooted in the local and the trustworthy and the familial to actually grow and expand in such a way that people find it really attractive, such that they want more of it. And so that's probably how I'd answer, is that I actually think that the right balance is not denying either of those worlds. I don't think big corporations are inherently evil because they're big. I just think that as you grow bigger, there are temptations to sacrifice some of the core moral and ethical principles of business ownership and transparency that become more tempting for a larger corporate entity than they are for the local one. And I also think that the government has done a horrible job of rewarding large corporate enterprise while punishing small businesses. And so to the extent that you can help a small business become larger by your dollars contributing to their growth, I think that's a wonderful thing. And I would even venture to say that to some degree it's actually a moral good. At least a nationalistic good.
Before Mr. Bahnsen jump into a quick, Reece, I actually want to hear your thoughts on this one too.
So what I want to point out is I think that the concern that I want to express is that capital formation and capital flow into Christian hands is the thing that we want to see in order to encourage dominion. And the problem is that public markets make it illegal for you to be basically expressly Christian And so private markets, not for you as an individual, Mr. Bahnsen, I mean companies.
Explain what you
So if you said we're going to apply God's law to an area, what you would have is you would say, the 1964 Civil Rights Act has been interpreted so as to say it's illegal for you to use a character issue to discriminate on the basis of this character issue for employment.
There's nothing to do about it. It's the law of the land.
So that's the law of the land, that's true. And then the securities markets have applications from regulators where they increase requirements, they have increased regulation there, and they have increased requirements for affirmation of certain things.
About our faith?
About the application of certain rules.
Okay, now I'm not being critical, I'm actually being inquisitive because it's a very big statement you made.
Sure.
And I'm asking for an example of where in securities law, there is some question about the affirmation of one's faith or the application of one's faith.
So-
That is unique to public markets.
My understanding is that in order to trade on the New York Stock Exchange, you have to agree to abide by federal regulations.
Well, that's a tautology. To be under a federal exchange, you have to agree to federal regulation. And to be a business in the United States, you have to agree to follow American laws. That is about private companies and public companies. That's about big companies and small companies. But there's not a segment of business that's allowed to break the law.
Sure, and as I would say that the law of God is over the Constitution, is over American law, that the Constitution itself is the highest law in terms of our secular order.
But again, I understand, and we could go back to where you were going with it. It's just Darren saw me have a look. My look was intuitive to the specifics of what you said about being a public company. And to the extent that there is not public consensus that the law of God trumps the laws of the land, that would be universally true in the country, not specific to public finance.
Okay, so the difficulties of working if you're a public company, the degree to which you're going to take heat for trying to
Yes.
apply Christian, the scrutiny, the difficulties, levels of lawsuits, the kinds of things that are likely to come up, the way in which it becomes prohibitively expensive. My concern is private markets are far more efficient. The federal system for being able to support a Christian formation of capital. The problem is that the federal laws associated with being able to seek to get capital make it so that you're not allowed to raise capital from people unless they make over $200,000 a year or have $1 million of assets. You have to get accredited investors. If I were to right now give you all, hey, everybody, here's an opportunity to invest in a particular offering, that would be a breaking of federal law right now. If I am not then going through a screening process where your CPA or lawyer tells me that you're an accredited investor after I've then told you that. So the way of getting Christian capital to form for Christian businesses is highly made inefficient. And the public markets are the most efficient way to organize capital around new causes. And so my concern is we have to figure out how to organize capital to have explicitly Christian businesses. And it's not so much about who we're trading with, it's about capital formation. That is the thing that's slowing down our ability to increase dominion, to have businesses that are putting money into that. So you pick your fights, and just like an example, we're suing the state of New York because of the fact they have a body armor ban. Well, that's one small private business that I've got that's dealing with that. And we're going to have to deal with, our one in-house attorney is going to deal with a bunch of public lawyers that are paid for by the state of New York. And I wonder which one will have more lawyer hours that are able to be put into the case. And so, they extracted those dollars by coercive taxation to fight to uphold that unconstitutional law. We are unlikely to be reimbursed for the legal costs. Right, so that's one example. If we were more public, if we had public access to capital, we could probably get people to buy stock just to support that. But it's difficult to get capital into Christian businesses.
But I mean, you do understand that there's never been a public company ever that didn't start as a private company. So they had to go through the process of being private, and having the various regulations that exist on raising money in private offering memorandums on their way to becoming a public company. So I'm in 100% agreement with the conclusion of the need to rethink capital formation, and there are probably some things that I don't think are being properly understood about how capital markets work in this case. But your philosophy behind this, I agree with, that we want to use capital markets to our benefit to the cause of human flourishing. But the lowest hanging fruit for people who want capital markets, if you're a defender of free enterprise, you are, I am, those in the audience that are, this is already embedded in our belief system. Capital is going to flock to its most rational and efficient use. And there'll be people who try to get in the way of that, but you can't stop capital from getting to its most efficient use. And the problem we have with capital formation of what you're calling Christian-owned businesses, I promise you, it's not capital markets, it's bad Christian-owned businesses, over and over again. If Christian-owned businesses want a cozier relationship with capital markets, then start delivering a return on investment. That's what investors invest in, and you will have non-Christians want to invest in your company when it is promising a return on investment. The various regulatory inefficiencies around capital markets are not unique to the Christian faith. These are things that unbelievers who want to do business complain about all the time. And people could weigh, these are prudential questions about whether or not fully private offerings with no liquidity, with a high risk of loss, should be made available to people with $5,000 in their savings account or not. There is an argument to be said, it's none of the state's business, let people do it. There's an argument to be made that those situations have gone so poorly so long that the state chose to intervene. There aren't really laws against angel investing, but to the point that one chooses to set up and register a security, then there is a regulatory apparatus that you and I both would consider to be highly inefficient. But my belief is that those inefficiencies are extremely non-discriminatory in terms of the bureaucracy. They apply to everyone, and that one of the great ways we change it is by having more Christians who want to exercise dominion in capital markets that can get in and change the system inside out. That includes private markets, it includes public markets, and perhaps another thing Christians could do is stop the grotesque 10th commandment violation that always comes from demonizing capital markets because they sound like spoiled children.
I've never enjoyed a beer this much. This is
that A+?
it's a little taste of heaven right here.
I thought you might want a Bud Light.
Darren, the thing I wanted to say, because I really liked Michael's answer a lot to Steve's question. I think that when we talk about some of these things, Pastor, the way you framed it, that is very often the case that the answer ought to be, this is a both and, not an either or. And I'm not being funny or snobbish or something. I don't have any idea what raw honey is or raw milk is. I really don't. I just don't. I'm not super qualified to, like if someone said, do you get your raw honey from the person down the street or from a big corporation? I'd just be like, no. But to the extent that there are benefits in subsidiarity, that we, throughout church tradition, have believed is a moral principle, I would also argue there are market principles. Trust is easier in proximity and all of that. The only thing, it's not a pushback, it's an and to what Michael's saying. My belief in why such a significant part of what my company does is in private investing and small and illiquid company where it's appropriate for the investor. One of the reasons why my own personal portfolio is so filled with dozens of private small companies, Andrew mentioned my investment Red Balloon, things of that nature, is not because of me trying to attach a value system other than the value of doing good business. And I frankly believe that part of the inefficiency I presuppose in Washington, D.C. should be presupposed in large companies. There are three $3 trillion companies right now in terms of market capitalization in American public markets. I do not believe they're going to stay $3 trillion companies. There is an inefficiency in bureaucracy, And so whether it's a moral case around the trust and credibility and proximity of a relationship, or a sentimental argument that there is some sort of a community value, a Tocquevillian sensibility we want to establish, I think it's all of both and, but I also agree, for someone to make this ethically normative, it's farisaical, because you want businesses operating at scale as well.
Yeah.
This is why I give all my money to the Bahnsen Group, but go on.
Well, I think when you think about it, is a big business better, small business better? God cares more about the players than the score, right? It depends on you, right? If you're being lazy and just doing your little hobby business and not really taking care of your family because it's easier for you, then you're being sinful by having a small business, right? And I think Christians have lost a sense of ambition because they've seen sinful ambition, and it's horrible. Right? You see it, you see in Wall Street, there's movies about it, like, man, that's horrible, sinful ambition. But Christians should be ambitious. They should be ambitious for their family. And what's cool about business is an opportunity to bless people at scale. So if you wanted to go feed a family, you could make a dinner for them and take it to them every night. If you wanted to do it for 2 families, you're going to start stretching your budget and your wife's not going to like you as much. If you want to do it for 1,000 families, you're dead, right? And the only way, if you want to feed 1 million families, is to build a business, because then you can bless people at scale. You build DoorDash, and all of a sudden, 1 million people are getting a meal delivered, right? But you couldn't do that unless you can build a business that uses market forces to allow you to make enough profit that it makes sense for you to deliver 1 million meals to 1 million people, right? So business is an opportunity to bless people at scale with your work. And it comes down to more about what your heart is. If you're being lazy, sometimes you're having a sinful ambition, and that's why you want to build your big business. Or sometimes you're being a sinful lazy, and that's why you have your small business. And so you need to check your heart and repent of your sin, and then do whatever you want.
And I want to throw something else, and this has been reassuring to me because it's given me a sense that there's some fiscal and investment common sense to the instinct I have. But I want to say something else to speak to the issue of vocation more broadly. One of the great rediscoveries of the Reformation, as I said earlier tonight, was that our secular work is pleasing to God. One of the mistakes we've then made on the back of that is to identify our vocation with paid employment. That's a mistake. Our vocation, in almost all cases, actually I'd say in all cases, is broader than our paid employment. Put it another way, looking at Kyle here, what is Kyle? Well, Kyle, I don't know what you do for a living, but whatever it is you do to actually earn money.
Oh, I thought you were changing the subject. You were just like, by the way, what is Kyle?
I was getting past her.
Somebody had to ask.
Yeah, it's still a posture here.
What is it?
So he's got a job or something, but he's also husband to Jenny, father to Theoden and Stonewall, jiu-jitsu amateur, former mixed martial artist, got a bunch of other hobbies. And I'm not being trivial in saying that's part of who Kyle is. It's his calling in the world. We don't want to shrink vocation to just a thing that somebody else is willing to pay me for, or that I can sell to a third party. That's particularly significant for kids at school, not earning any money, just costing lots, and mothers, of course, who are the most undervalued profession in the world. What it does is it means, let's suppose you've got a passion, like I've got a passion for carving wooden bowls on my lathe. Now the mistake I could have made as a 16-year-old is thinking I just so love the feel of these glistening, perfect pieces of created magnificence that I have to make a career out of it. And I promise I would have made myself miserable. And my family would have starved. Whereas
You put some raw honey in that bowl, and I feel like
Whereas here's the thing, if
the imagery is just, I mean,
if what I can do is to get a job that supports my family, yeah, I'm going past that, I'm joking, but we're very well looked after, it's all fine. Thankful to God, very thankful to God. But it's not relegating it to the status of a hobby. It is embracing it as something which, by God's grace, I don't need to make money out of. I can be as bad at making wooden bowls as I like and still enjoy it. And that's part of what I'm called to do when I get 5 minutes free time. So all of us can do that. I'm looking at my friend here, Rohan is just one that pops into my head, but whatever it is, and speaking especially to the younger people, you might have a passion for playing the piano or playing baseball or something. You can love playing the piano and love playing baseball and not put yourself under the pressure of having to make a living out of it. Get yourself a decent job that pays you, that you enjoy as well, pays you well enough that you can enjoy that thing as well. It's just another way of cutting the vocation.
I agree 100%. I just would like to point out, Pastor, and this is the economist to me talking, it's a lot easier for Christians to appreciate the activities that don't generate a profit when they first understand that they're only made possible by the activities that do generate a profit. And so to the extent one wants to make...
Can you say that again?
That was worth the price of admission, right?
Hold on. Just hold on.
All activities that don't make a profit are made possible by activities that do make a profit. The raw materials to make bowls that we're going to sell at a loss can only be done if there was first profitable activity that bought the bowls. And it can only be sustained if there's something else continuing to feed, et cetera. This is one of the arguments in classical economics from Adam Smith and the virtue of self-interest, that one is able to sustain activities that meet the needs of others when there is profit. You may have a lot of value in hobbies and other activities. They're not profitable, but by definition, they can't be sustained because the losses at some point then exhaust the resources that made them possible. To the extent that there are profitable activities that make possible unprofitable activities, and I mean this in an economic context, then I think that Christians could really rediscover a vigorous celebration of those activities that don't generate profit, that aren't intended to. They deal more with beauty and hobby and whatnot. If we could recover the economic sense that profit-making activities, which so often fall into demonization, are the mother's milk of unprofitable activities.
So there are
I'm going to
couple
name drop.
points.
I was going to name drop, but is it? Well, I mean, you got something real good. I mean, it's got to be real good. No.
I've got like an hour of people's time tomorrow, so I've got
Okay. I was going to name drop and say, in the words of one of my clients, a guy named Kid Rock, he said, you have to know when the show is over. You have to know when that song, that's it. Like, you just said it, you got the moment, you got to know. That's it. That was fantastic. Give it up for everybody here on the stage. And I need a photo with everybody up here. Someone grab my phone. Wide angle. I need a wide angle.